We are live. There we go.
Hello, hello, hello.
We are starting out. Ready to go. On Friday the 13th.
A lucky day.
So if you see any black cats walk by, I don't know what that means.
Probably nothing. The
Yeah.
cats just do what I want.
Odds are it means nothing.
It does mean absolutely nothing.
That I think Groucho Marx once said, if a black cat crosses your path, it's probably going somewhere.
Ah. Oh, but by the way, I had I think I mentioned when it happened. I don't know, last year or something. Somebody, and I think she's ex-Marvel too. She works for Simon and Schuster. They're doing a book on women in Marvel. Good evening, Tid Goblin.
Hello, Tit Goblin.
Doing a book on women in Marvel. And they're seeing if anybody had photos of women in Marvel over the years, which of course I do. So she got in touch with me. This is like last year. And they're not, first of all, they're not paying for these photos. You know, they just wanted to see who had them. And it's not like there's any money offer on the table. And they sent me this release to sign so they could use my photos, which said that they can do anything they want with my photos irrevocably into the future, no matter the medium.
Mm-hmm.
To which I said, no, thank you.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, but you can still use the photos for whatever you want too. I'm like, well,
That's right, you can.
Yeah, I already can do that.
Yeah. You own the copyright of that photo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, just she's in the I think she said she worked at Marvel from like 2006 to 2013 or something like that. And now she's at Simon and Schuster. And so she, in our Marvel, one of our Marvel groups, she was like, "Oh, anybody got any photos?" People like, "Oh, ask Jared, ask Jared." I was like, I responded, "I did not want to sign my rights away. No, thank you." Because you know, I'd had a, and she said, "Oh," she said something like, "Well, let me send you an email. We've got some clarity on that release or whatever." And she's like, she sent me an email. I talked to the higher up editor, and he said, "Oh, that's really just for so they can have print this book or whatever, and you're not signing away the rights to your photos. You still have all your rights." And I'm like, no, I'm like this is how Alan Moore signed that contract.
Yes.
When you say that. But this contract says, they're like, nah, don't worry. And this is exactly what Alan Moore said. The people explain, the editors explain how that's not really what the contract says. But guess what? That's really what the contract.
That's what the contract says. And I bet you nowhere in the contract did it say anything about the love bucks or
no love checks in that contract.
No love checks at all. Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And DC creates a trade paperback catalog just so Alan Moore can never have the rights to Watchmen.
Yeah.
The things they do just to keep the rights to something.
And that's exactly, you always hear someone say, well, he signed that contract. He knew what it meant. No, he didn't necessarily. Not with people saying, oh, no, that contract doesn't mean that. I just got one of those emails today. Mm-hmm. This is what it really means. That's not what it says in the release form. It says they get to use them. I'm like, and when it comes down between the conflict between Simon and Schuster and me over rights, guess who wins?
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you go to Judge Judy.
Yeah. Good evening. Comics Unlimited 666 with a new name. God OV Grind.
I'm liking that Dr. Doom image.
So I was just like seeing that going, this is how, 24-year-olds get talked into signing these contracts.
Mm-hmm.
They get told what it means, and what it actually means is something different.
Yeah, I remember reading a story once about Dave Sim. Somebody wanted to license something from him, and Sim was going, I don't understand this, rewrite it. After 2 weeks, the guys they decided they didn't want us to license anything from him anymore.
That's like the Sim at DC Comics story too. Like in the early aughts, some editor at DC wanted Sim to do something for him, and
I
they
guess it
sent
was
Sim the
that.
contract, and he
Yeah,
saw
I
one
think
thing
it
in
was
it and
that.
said, "I don't know what this means," and just questioning it, the lawyer said, "Don't use them." It's like,
it would probably be cheaper to just not swindle the artist instead of paying the lawyers.
but no, swindling the artist is their business model.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. And I've heard so many horror stories about, brand new companies, brand new comic book companies that wants you to sign their contracts, and if you don't read them, there was one guy that I know who's an artist, who's a friend of mine, and it was like he was approached by this company and he read the contract, and the contract basically said, you work for us, and when the book is over, you can't work for any other company at all. No competing company. There wasn't even a competing clause. It was that if you don't work for us, you don't work for anybody else.
Well,
And
that
it's
sounds
like,
like a crime.
are you crazy? So that was insane. So you got to read everything.
I'm still waiting for my Pepsi Jet. I signed the contract and everything.
It'll be in the mail any day now.
I decided today to get rid of my floppies and just focus on trades and omnibus editions. Me and my wife travel, as she's a travel nurse. It would be easier. We're in Nebraska. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. God of Grind, let me welcome you into the world of the assholes, and congratulations on living the world of the suckers.
Yes. Now you can take advantage of the person you used to be.
Exactly. There's two types of comic collector: the sucker and the asshole. And the sucker pays more than 10 spawns for a certain comic.
Yes. I was
no more spawns for you.
I'm both this week because I got 3 trades to show off plus my comic.
Nice.
Actually, one this Simon Cross, Too Dead to Die. This is an original graphic novel, so there's neither assholes nor suckers with this one. There's only people who buy the original graphic novel because it never appeared in individual issues. But this is Howard Chaykin with Mark Guggenheim writing. And I got to say, I don't like Howard Chaykin's line quality a lot of the time these days. Because he's got a very sketchy line sometimes.
Whoops, Galactus is alive.
What was that?
Galactus
my
is alive.
chair bumped into Galactus and knocked everything that was on top of it down.
Yeah. It's a very cool cover. It's a very, very good book. Like I said, sometimes his line quality, I'm just like, ooh, he could have spent more than 3 seconds on that hair.
Oh, I'm sure it was recorded.
The rest of it is so, the storytelling, the cover, the color, he does all the color too, is terrific. His graphic design is really good. And I think it's a Dave Johnson cover too. Yes, I love bulk editions, especially Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol. I'd rather they were thinner, those. I like the Image comics, like Absolute, what are they called? Ultimate editions that have like 12 comics in them. To me, that's a good size.
I'm beginning to appreciate the idea that a trade paperback should be at least 400 pages.
See, I understand that's gigantic. That's like,
yeah, but you know what? If it goes for 12 volumes, it can get canceled midway. If it goes for 3 volumes, they publish everything.
You want it all right then. I can understand.
Yeah, I just don't want the actual omnibus with 1,800 pages because you can't actually read the thing.
Those are tough. Like I said, the 12 issues and 1 hardcover I like. Mm-hmm. Once it start getting into 30, 40, 50 issues, it's like, whoa. Yeah. They're nice, but they're gigantic.
Yeah, more than 20. Yeah, the essentials showed us the way.
Yeah. But this is very good. The writing was solid, but just okay. It's the story of an old spy who comes out of retirement for another mission. If you've read a story like that before, you've probably read this story. But Chaikin does a nice job with it. I mean, I just really liked the artwork. Besides not always liking his line quality, his just everything. His storytelling is just terrific. A wide variety of characters too. Sometimes I've seen Chaikin do stuff where you can't tell. All his characters look the same. Sometimes his heroic character. The knock on Chaikin has always been, Cody Starbuck looks like American Flag, looks like every other Chaikin hero.
Yes, Chaikin's idealized version of himself.
Right. And sometimes that bleeds over into the other characters on occasion. It does not here. Everybody was like, this read so smoothly, and a lot due to Chaikin. So I really enjoyed it. Even though, like I said, the story itself, the plot, I'd read before. It's a spy coming out of retirement story.
I always thought that Chaikin did very good at coming up with minor quirks that it can give the characters.
Yeah.
So that's what makes the characters interesting.
Yeah.
Not that it does much with those minor quirks. It's just they're just there.
But like compared to Hey Kids Comics, which was a comics history fictionalization thing, which was very complex. Hard to read even at times because he changed time periods between 3 time periods. So there was like 3 casts of characters. Sometimes there were characters from a before time period, only older. And sometimes there were thinly veiled versions of actual comic book people. And sometimes there were composites of comic book people. So it was really a complex read. This was like the opposite. It was like such a smooth and easy read compared to Hey Kids Comics, which I did enjoy, but it was a complex read. It put some people off who I know. But the Chaikin smoothness of storytelling was really in that. You have a favorite Chaikin piece, Paulo?
I still have a lot of Chaikin to read.
Yeah, I skipped like 2 decades of Chaikin when he was doing stuff for Marvel, for DC mostly, I think it was. Some stuff for Marvel too. Being that I'm an indie guy, I just never really saw it much. It was only when he started doing indie stuff like 10 years ago with Black Kiss 2. I've
never read Black Kiss. I wanted to read Times Square. I really felt like it's something that I should have read.
You know what? I think I read that. I'm not 100% sure. It's been so long. I'm going to check my graphic novel section. But wasn't he doing a sequel to that?
Times Square. There were 2 Times Square graphic novels.
One wasn't lately, though, right?
No.
Okay. Maybe I thought I read he was doing a sequel to that sometime recently, but maybe I'm mistaken.
Maybe he reprinted the stuff?
Maybe that could have been it.
Yeah, I have the American Flag collected editions with the first 12 issues. I actually bought something that he put out at Vertigo called American Century, but they only did 2 trades of that. They didn't. I
remember that.
Did the whole series.
That ran for a while, didn't it?
Yeah.
Did he write and draw that, or just write it?
Right, he just wrote it.
Okay.
But he probably did the character designs because the main characters looks like another American flag.
Looks like Cody Starbuck.
Yeah.
Was Caleb Hammer his? No. There was
Caleb Hammer. No, not Caleb Hammer. Dominic Fortune.
Dominic Fortune. That's who I was thinking. From Marvel, another one from Marvel Premiere who had like one issue.
The only thing I think of Howard that I actually read. And that was because Dominic Fortune teamed up with Spider-Man in a Marvel team-up. So I was aware of the character. and I was aware that Howard was connected to him. But that off the top of my head, thinking about it, that's the only thing I probably read of his when he was doing Marvel books. If he did a Marvel book, chances are I read that particular book. But I don't think I ever followed him anywhere else. I mean, I read his Star Wars stuff because that's what I
Right.
was reading at the time. I don't think I touched the Bizarre Adventures, although that's where Dominic Fortune was at. But then his Spider-Man books was the only thing that I know that I read. I don't recall what he did for DC.
He did what did he do? Who did he the Shadow?
The Shadow. Yeah, the Shadow. And he redesigned the Shadow to look like himself.
Yeah, it was his Web of Spider-Man is where I was aware of at least that character. And his Nick Fury Wolverine graphic novel, I know I read that.
Yeah.
And
I only met Howard once. I think it was like 5 years, like 2017 or something. I was hanging with Bob Wyachek for the day at one of the New York Comic Cons, the one in the Penn Plaza, and Howard Chaykin sat next to him, and he was a lot of fun. We had a good time hanging out.
It sounds a lot of fun. One of the interviews that the Comic Book Historians podcast did with him is probably the best of all of them.
Yeah. The interview he did with with Kayfabe too was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always fun to listen to.
Yeah, he's a fun guy to listen to,
and very opinionated.
Yes.
He'll
tell you when he likes something. He'll tell you when he doesn't like something.
Yeah, and I don't think he's inconsistent, which is good also. Cause
he is not. So Wilson doesn't have a favorite Howard Chaykin because he hasn't read enough.
I have not read enough. I would say I probably everything I've read of his, or the bulk, is going to be Star Wars. Whenever he did like a Marvel book, because he comes in and writes for a little while and goes, like the Indiana Jones books. I know I read those, but I couldn't point out and go, that's a Howard Chaykin book. It was just more of like, oh, that's a Wolverine book that happened to be written by Howard Chaykin.
I thought he did
or I've seen his art in places like For Your Eyes Only. He did the cover art for that. So
I thought he did a terrific job with that Star Wars adaptation. In terms of, I haven't read it in a long time, but I always liked it growing up.
Yeah,
I know he doesn't like it because, as he said, he had to knock that out so fast. But his storytelling in it is good. That's what I always liked about it. There were certainly some rough spots in the drawing and inking, but the story is told well, I think.
Right. Yeah, I've always enjoyed the stories that I had read of his. I'm almost sure I probably read The Shadow. And while I was looking online, Star Reach, which is that Cody Starbuck.
Oh, yeah.
I know I've had to have that issue.
There were reprints of that in the early 80s. Star Reach Classics.
Okay, so I may have gotten those. And American Flag, I know I have issues from First because I bought a lot of First comics because they were the least expensive out of them all, I believe. And so I had gotten a lot of those issues, but I could not recall a single issue of American Flag. I see the covers, like I know I own that cover. I know I have that book. I don't remember the stories at all.
It's more about the world, I guess. Because the rest of the cast, including the android, the cat's fun, but the android's kind of boring. The android appeared in that crossover that first did between all the titles.
Okay. I've not read American. I don't have my issues anymore. I gave them to my friend Rob, who's a big fan, more of a fan of them than I was, and I needed the room at the time. So, because I had no intentions of reading American Flag again, I still don't. Just because it ended badly. It kind of just petered out. Because Chaykin stopped drawing it. That he's
sure that the when those publishers started appearing, the authors did not really think of the work that they were doing in terms of in literary terms. So
Yeah.
they would create a series and then they would go on making it every month,
Right.
which is not what you actually want.
That's what I see. That's when I say American Flag disappointed me in the end. Was just because of that, where the first, I don't know, 8 or 10 issues of American Flag seemed to have a purpose and a point. And then it seemed all to be leading somewhere. But it wasn't. It was just leading to being a monthly comic by First, that Howard Chaykin wrote and someone else drew. And that's when I was like, if it had some sort of climax, some sort of ending, not even an ending to the comic book necessarily, but an ending to the story he was telling in the beginning. Because it didn't even, because the story he was kind of telling was about Reuben Flagg was, he was like a porno actor who had been replaced by a hologram. So then he went into law enforcement and he learned about the dirty, corrupt world of law enforcement. Now that should have led to some sort of realization, some sort of point, but it didn't. It just, like Paulo said, they weren't thinking about it in literary terms. They were just thinking about getting a monthly comic out. And that's eventually what it became, a monthly comic.
Because it happened with all of the series from that time. Grimjack was the same. I mean, the stories were fun individually,
right,
but they don't go anywhere.
Right.
John Sable kind of ends when the comic is canceled.
Right.
Dreadstar Jim Starlin also leaves. Starlin did provide an ending to his own story in number 40, but I guess that one doesn't count. Nexus is the same.
Nexus at least had story arcs.
Right.
It did,
but the story itself doesn't quite end, and that's kind of the reason why they went back to retelling.
I'm okay with the story not ending as long as there's like story. Some individual story has an ending. Like Nexus always had ended this story, started this one, ended this one, started this one. And I'm fine with that. But like American Flag just started a story and then stopped. I think Nexus was a big fan of Tommy Lee Edwards. I think Chaykin was a mentor of sorts. He's pretty good, Tommy Lee Edwards. I like his stuff.
Nexus is a problem because when he starts adding to the cast of characters, then they don't get enough development, but they have something going on, like his daughters.
Right.
His daughters in particular, they were something that should have gotten more development.
I think he just threw stuff against the wall to have stuff for later. That's what Chris Claremont did in his X-Men. He always said he put subplots in there because he always feared he'd run out of his ideas. So he put subplots in all the time that he could always go back to.
That's a great way to keep your job going.
And the fact that the Merc kind of threw a ratio to the win in terms of giving him powers, it wasn't properly resolved either.
No.
Judah was always there, but Mike Baron should have done something more with Judah. Also with Sandra. I mean, she's not just there to be cute. She right from the beginning, she's there to spy on Nexus. But then that itself doesn't go anywhere.
You know what it is? The slice of life moments in Nexus were the weakest parts. And those are all sort of the slice of life moments, the stuff that's going around on Ilum. like with Judah and all the other people. There was always like some little politics going on with that guy who I can't remember.
Tyrone.
For me,
Tyrone.
Nexus was more for just eye candy. It was just
Yeah.
always a beautiful book to look
Steve
at,
Rude.
and I
Yeah.
maybe one or two stories. I think God Con was the only one that I kind of remember story wise. All the other ones, I couldn't tell you the story that was going on because it was just always beautiful to look at the book. And I probably spent more time looking at the book than reading the book for Nexus.
All the other ones were Nexus is sitting around on Ilum dealing with some slice of life stuff, and then the Merc gives him an assignment. So he's got to go out and kill some. Then they give you backstory on the guy who he has to kill. Then he goes out and has to go through some machinations to take care of the guy.
Mhm.
That's like a typical Nexus story. King Spode in the house. King Spode, you missed last week. I was talking about your G.G. Allen graphic novel. I enjoyed it.
Mhm.
I was showing it off and talking about it. So go to the beginning. If you want to look at, listen to the beginning of last week's show. I think it was somewhere in the first hour. But good job on the G.G. Allen GN. Yeah, I always enjoyed Nexus, but now that I think about it, those slice of life moments. You're welcome. Were the weakest. I never thought about that before, but they were kind of like who cares about Nexus hanging out on Ilum, trying to navigate the politics.
Yeah. The thing is, Tyrone's kind of an asshole. I mean,
Yeah.
Horatio tells them quite clearly, "This is my place.
Right.
Yeah, you guys can stay. I don't care what you do, but don't do anything to upset me." And then Tyrone starts running around. "Excuse me, Horatio, we have rights." "No, you don't. You're in the guy's house. Leave."
Well, I'd have to say that the problem was always, I mean, it was always the same problem, and there was no solution to it, but politics, where Nexus would accept any refugees coming in. He would accept them on Ilum, and they could live there. So he ended up with, thousands and thousands of people living there with no rules. Mm-hmm. And undesired elements started coming in too, and that's what they were trying to politic away, but never could, because Nexus didn't really care about the politics of it. He just didn't want to be bothered. But meanwhile, he couldn't just let the refugees suffer living in Ilum, so he had to do something about it, which was always ineffective. Yeah, I haven't read besides the series that came out in the last 20 years, the miniseries, the various ones. I haven't reread my 80s Nexuses in a long time.
I haven't gone back to any of those books in a very long time.
Which is kind of funny. A few months ago, I was on one of the Portuguese streams, and just offhandedly, the guy said, "Hey, do you think we could do we've had newspaper collections for Marvel, DC, also for non-specific graphic novels that are of literary importance." Mm-hmm. Where they had everything. There's Tardi in there, but there's also slice of life manga and some other independent comics, and they put out V for Vendetta there. I don't think they put on it. They should have put on a Stereospolip, and they didn't. But it's what could we do a series, a newspaper collection with U.S. indie classics, mm-hmm. And I did a list. I think there's 79. Yeah, about 70 something, and some of them have to be broken up into 2 volumes, so there would be about 90 something books. Wow. Yeah, when you think of all of the interesting indie comics from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. You actually don't think that there's that many, because we're always trying to go back to remembering Marvel and DC, but there's quite a lot. And the things that I needed to put in that collection, not only I can do. There's things that I can't do, and there's things that I can do. For example, I would not put Nexus because there's no storyline with a definitive conclusion that fits into one volume.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't put Badger for the same reason. and I can put Bone because it's the entire volume.
It's a big volume. What if Todd McFarlane and Steve Rude like each other?
Yeah.
The conversations are just them talking about themselves in the third person.
But I can do that with American Flag because we always have those first 12 issues.
Right.
I can do that with Green Jack, especially if I stick to the short stories that came out in the back of Star Slayer.
Yep.
I can do Star Slayer because Mike Grell only did the first arc and then he left.
Star Slayer isn't very good either.
Do you have that list broken down for the 70s? Like, I know about the boom of the 80s with independent artists doing their own books, but I don't know what is specifically 70s indie artist.
Well, some went across the era, like, Dave Sim and Cerebus.
Yeah, but I can't use Cerebus because the storyline is 25 issues.
Yeah.
That's not 2 volumes, that's 4, and I can put them in a newspaper collection for that. But there's some things that I could put out in that collection given the size. So Cobalt 60 would fit there. Black Mark, Richard Corbin's Bloodstar, and the first Dan story. What else?
ElfQuest?
ElfQuest? No.
That'd be a 70s one.
Yeah, but I can't put that because it's ongoing.
No, the first 12 issues there was not supposed to be anything past the first 12 issues.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd rather convince a publisher to put out.
Oh, okay. You want to be definitive so you can convince a publisher.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's because the first thing that came to my mind when my friend asked us how we could do that, the first thing that popped into my mind was Rocketeer.
Yeah.
It had a movie that would help you sell it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I wanted to.
Would you consider the Ninja Turtles part of that, the very first Mirage Studio run?
Yeah, because the first reprinted the first issues from Mirage as a graphic novel, and that's 136 pages, so it would fit into this collection. So I could do their first arc, and it would work. Could put Star Slammers there. And then I went going around. Okay, what's actually indie alternative that would fit into that collection? Because now I'm putting stuff alongside all of the adventure comics, because there's a lot of adventure comics in here. But then I want to add something that's relevant,
right?
And that would have to. I wanted to, for some reason, I wanted to do Trashman collection, even though none exists.
Spain, that is, right?
Yeah.
I have never read Trashman, I don't think.
Yeah, I think I could put Stuck Rubber Baby there.
Oh, wow. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, and one Optic Nerve volume.
Okay.
One Hate volume. So I guess I'd go with Hey Buddy.
Like a Velvet Glove cast in iron?
Yeah, that too. It's here, yeah. I think we've had a couple of Daniel Klaus books published here, so it would help.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Which is kind of funny, because I also want to put Danger Girl there in the collection. Yeah, so that's the thing.
Campbell.
Yeah, it's got Daniel Klaus, and then there's American Flag, and then there's
Danger Girl.
Yeah, but why? I mean, why not?
Cherry Pop Tart. Throw some of her in.
There you go.
I don't know. I decided on not adding Sally Forth.
Sally Forth?
Yeah, at first there's a list of things that I can't use there, and I wouldn't want to use there, and Sally Forth is one.
That's a comic strip. I only know that.
Yeah, and then I had another problem. There are things which are too short to fit into a 100-something page volume.
Uh-huh.
But I came up with a secondary collection of shorter graphic novels, and then I would had something like so I could have Grendel Devil by the Deep, because I don't want to put the rest of Grendel in there, even though I like Grendel.
One of my favorite shorter graphic novels would be The Fall by Jason Lutz and Ed Brubaker. It was originally in Dark Horse Presents, and I have a copy of it that's like magazine size. It's like 48 pages or something. It's not long.
Yeah, it would fit here. I mean, I wanted to use the Grendel Devil by the Deep, but also Saber, which has never been published in Portugal. I know that Brazilians did it in 1990, but I also wanted to do something with P. Craig Russell's opera stories.
By the way, Paulo, how do you pronounce Portugal in Portugal?
Portugal.
Okay. Because my sister was just asking me that, because our neighbors are from Ghana.
Right.
And they pronounce it like that. She's like, how does Paulo pronounce Portugal? I said, he says Portugal, but he's speaking in English. So I don't know how he pronounces it in Portuguese. Would Bean World count? Would that have a start name?
I forgot Bean World, although I'm not sure about how the stories are set up.
I haven't read it since the 80s, so I am not sure.
Yeah, I don't recall.
I was so shocked when that guy became like the president of Image Comics, Larry Marder. I'm like, what? The Bean World guy?
Do I have any Marder here? Yeah, I decided on Bean World not, even though I'm not entirely sure on how the stories are set up, because I also decided on not having any Harvey Pekar.
Okay.
And
how do you know one of his graphic novels, like The Quitter, drawn by Dean Haspiel?
I don't think I have any Dean Haspiel here. I saw something by Haspiel and then I didn't add it.
No. I just looked over it myself to see a good one. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. If you don't read Bean World, it reads you.
Is it Soviet Russia?
Have you
in Soviet Russia, Bean World means it reads you.
Have you ever heard of David Yurkovich?
No.
He did a book in the late 90s, is it? Called Death by Chocolate. That's really good. That would be, I think there's a couple volumes of it. I think the Death by Chocolate redo that might be the collected edition, REDUX. But one of my favorites from the late 90s. There are some artists who when I look at their art, I go, but when I read it, their storytelling is just mesmerizing. And he's one of those guys who, when I look at his art, I'm just like, it's okay. But when I read his actual stories, it's really mesmerizing. His storytelling is excellent. But that's a little known indie one. David Yurkovich, Death by Chocolate.
Yeah. The thing is, I when I start talking to other people, then I can add to this list and then go. So, which is something that sometimes comes into my mind. How the hell do they make the selection process for these collections? I mean, I'm just coming up with this is an intellectual exercise. I'm going to go on my friend's live stream, and we're going to go for 2 hours. And I'm going to say names and this. Oh man, that would be cool. Oh, I've never heard of that. What is it? It would be something like that. And then probably some guys in the chat would probably ask about other things, and they would end up naming something that I forgot to put in here. But when you're coming up with, so I had not worked. I did set up some ground rules for myself regarding size, the story size, and the type of story that would be in there, precisely because I don't want anything that's ongoing that I can't use a satisfying ending. But Scarlet
Traces. There's 2 volumes. It's from Dark Horse, Ian Eddington and Disraeli. It's got some really nice artwork in it.
Is that British?
I don't know. Let's see. Does it say what they're? But it's from Dark Horse, published this version of it, and it might be British if I remember correctly, because it's sort of a War of the Worlds sequel. The front
Okay.
line of the World of Worlds has taken itself to the red. There's 2 volumes of it. When did this come out? This is volume 2, April 2007. Uh-oh. Taking that book down made
Dropped Ultraman.
Ultraman jump off my shelf. All of a sudden, I couldn't remember his name. I was looking for. I was like, Wilson will know it.
Yeah, but that's the thing. There's so much stuff out there. You try to come up with a list, and then you pick out 20 titles off of it, and then you have to worry about which ones are easier to get the rights to, and then which ones are easier to print. Or do you have the material in digital files so that they can be reprinted? So you're always going to end up missing.
This one's 100 pages, so I imagine it's around 200 for the 2 series.
About 100 should fix. The other collection that I wanted for the shorter stuff, which is for Saber and Grendel, and I also wanted to put the Futurians there. The Futurians, we have a funny story with the Futurians that here in Portugal. So we used to get the Brazilian Marvel comics from Editora Abril back in the 80s and 90s. And those were the leftover copies that didn't sell in Brazil. They would be sent over here 9 months after they were for sale there. But even here, not everything would sell. There would be leftovers. And there was a period where they got the leftovers, removed the covers, and would package 3 different comics into one hardcover volume. Yeah. And for some reason, they would call it Marvel Selections. And for some strange reason, they put the Futurians on the cover. I mean, there's Captain America, X-Men, and Daredevil inside, but they put the Futurians on the cover. And there's the Futurians were never published in Brazil, so we didn't know who they were. And
you were left to wonder who they are.
Yeah, who the hell are these guys? And through all my youth, until I finally started reading American magazines, and I had no idea who the Futurians were. Who the hell are these guys? Because they looked like the X-Men.
Exactly. That's the thing. Like this, they probably thought they were the X-Men.
Well, speaking of Portugal, Time Before Time, issue number 19, has what's his name? George Coelho drawing it. The Coelho, the guy who was doing Gatsby, is now doing a story arc for Time Before Time. Gatsby isn't finished. Wonder what happened. But did a nice job. This is the little book that could. It is really, it's flying under the radar, but it's really well done. I've been enjoying this one. It's like a time travel. This is the one that's there's time travel in it. There's 2 criminal syndicates that run time travel. What happened in this latest version is, in this latest story arc, 19 our 2 characters at the beginning were this guy who runs the time machine for one of the syndicates who was trying to get out. But it was that thing where, you sign the contract and you can't get out. Where, you're working for this criminal syndicate now, and you run up debts with them when you screw up. So he's trying to figure out a way to get out, and he can't. So he was going to steal one of the machines. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to him, this woman who mother and sister left when she was a kid via time travel that she was supposed to go with, but didn't get to because the syndicate screwed her and her dad, grew up to become an FBI agent in the year, 2110, whatever. And so she grabbed him and hijacked the time machine so she could go and find her mother and sister. 19 issues later, she finally finds her mother and sister with this special sort of, I don't know what this, they found this group like in the future who made one-way trips to like 10 million years in the past, where they were going to start over because they knew robots killed everyone. So there's so much weird stuff going on. So she finally got to meet her mother and sister, but like 10 years had passed for them too. So she was just expecting to see her mother and sister like the day after she left, but years passed for them too. And they're back in this futuristic past city. So it was a lot of fun, this issue, the first story in this. But this, this is a book that I think it's fly. I never hear anyone talk about it. I never see anyone else on YouTube getting it. One guy in my comments was like, "Hey, I get that one too. I like it." And I was like, "Cool, someone else likes it." But good book. Definitely a solid one. Time travel. Have there been a lot of time travel comics now that I think of it?
There's only been a handful if it was related to like a property. So Doctor Who, Marvel did a Doctor Who time travel one.
'Cause there's always time travel like in Marvel stories.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't think there's any that focus on just time travel particularly. DC probably did it more because I think Rip Hunter is all about time. Is all about time traveling. Gold only in the beginning started with time travel, and
so
then he
superhero comics use time travel to solve plot problems or to make plot problems. They don't actually use it kind of like Time Before Time uses it just kind of as for people to travel. It's like a way to travel kind of. It's about time travel and the effects of time travel. Days of Future Past.
It uses time travel as a device, but it's not a constant. You can almost say the same thing for like any of the Terminator books. It starts with a time travel item, but it doesn't stick with it.
It's never about like the effects of time travel and the effects time travel would have on society or something like that.
There was a Dark Horse comic which they made a movie out of. I think people are more familiar with the movie than the comic, Time Cop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think there was a TV show as well.
Wasn't Demolition Man like a time cop story too?
No, that's more of a Rip Van Winkle story. He goes to sleep in the past, wakes up in the future, and there's no way to go back.
Okay.
So that's basically what they did with that.
Yeah. The Flash is like the superhero books have always used time travel, but they've used it as a plot device. They've used it to tell a story in a different setting. It hasn't really had a lot to do with how to have effect on the world or even the individual kind of.
In the 70s, Marvel had a reprint comic called War is Hell, in which they reprinted Sergeant Fury stories. But then they started having original stories with a character called John Kowalski, and he had a quantum leap type deal going on. This was a decade before Quantum Leap. But he would jump from body to body to the body of soldiers who were about to die, and I think they would die. So I think he would experience their deaths.
Or was he causing them because he was in control?
And
then problem with time travel.
Avengers Forever and every Kang story is about time travel. I would think.
And many Fantastic Four stories. I mean, where
Kang
Kang
Dr. Doom in his time machine. Yeah.
Yep. Or Immortus, and the various Kang was this character or that character type of thing.
But I would say X-Men Days of Future Past, its biggest influence was showing superhero, comic book writers that to get dramatic effect, they can take an alternate version of the character and kill them.
Yeah.
That was like the lasting lesson from X-Men Days of Future Past, because they do it all the time now.
There's a Belgian comic called Blake and Mortimer. The guy who created it, he started out as an assistant to Hergé in Tintin, and the only I've never taken a liking to the story for some reason, even though it's a classic. The only story I actually like is the one where the main villain doesn't. The only one where the main villain doesn't show up, and it's the more fantastic one because there's a working time machine, and the villain's assistant who had died was a mad scientist, sends one of the protagonists throughout time. First, he goes to the past. Then he gets stranded for a while in the future. There's a Morlocks type deal going on. That particular story is the Diabolical Trap, but the time travel happens just so you can have an adventure story.
Yeah, that's what time travel is used for most, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Graphic Man is going to be checking those for those War is Hell issues in his
nice
Hulk Future Imperfect. I think Hulk Future Imperfect is one of those Days of Future. It's in the Days of Future Past family tree. It gets drama out of killing alternate versions of all your favorite heroes.
Right.
I just remember the Silver Surfer story from the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
The Silver Surfer travels to the future so he can escape the barrier that Galactus put around the Earth. Because he reasoned in the future where he was dead, the barrier wouldn't be there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And all the known universe has been destroyed by a guy called Overlord or something. I think it was Overlord. I can't remember exactly. And since the Surfer can't defeat him, he goes back to the past to prevent the accident that caused him to be born, because the Overlord to be born with powers, and then then he comes back to normal time and he's stuck on the Earth again.
Paper Girls. I forgot about that one. 62 Lefty Blues, and I read it and watched the TV show.
I did not read that one. The one that I'm aware of also, and only because I happen to watch a animation of it, is Valerian and Laureline. I think that was a French book.
Okay, the
I want to
Valyrian book.
say
Yeah.
yes, and that I believe dealt with time traveling. I don't know if it was on a regular basis, but I think it starts off with time traveling, or at least the anime did. I never read the actual comic books themselves, and the movie never even touched on the time travel portion of it.
Bunch is a fan of those Valyrian books.
Yes,
I know that.
so those, if it's translating the anime, in there he went back in time, took somebody from the past, came back to the future, and the Earth was gone, as if. And their version, I guess, of the Federation was completely gone. So they don't know what happened, and then they're spending their time to find the mystery of it. And I thought it was a lot of fun because he pulls the girl out from the past, yet she's able to deal about being in the future perfectly fine. And then the wackiness that ensues from basically a girl from the Middle Ages dealing with a guy from the future, and the mystery of why the Earth disappears altogether. All humans are gone as well.
Another book that I got this week is one with my name in it, The Ends from Bad Idea Comics. And this looks like it's a David Lapham. And David and Maria Lapham, I guess his wife is working with him. Story with a B-side too. And this one was really, I'm a huge David Lapham fan. So this one looks like it's, I'm not sure what year it's supposed to take place. 1985, pardon me, says so right at the beginning. So it takes place in 1985, and there's some slice of life stuff going on in here with a guy who's dating I think they're teenagers. He's dating this girl, and he doesn't want his family to meet her because she's Mexican. And it turns out his family are Nazi skinheads. And it looks like it's it's shaping up to be a showdown between World War II vets and Nazi skinheads. Because as you might imagine, the World War II vets do not like the Nazi skinheads. So there's all sorts of stuff going on in there about that, and I think that's where it's going. Otherwise, there wouldn't be some angry World War II vets in there, I imagine.
Right.
But it was a good, have you read much David Lapham, Wilson, or Paulo?
I don't
I
believe
have,
so.
I have the first Stray Bullets when they started coming up, reprinting the Stray Bullets in smaller volumes. So I only have the first one.
Yeah, good stuff. I have the oversized ones are really good.
Mm-hmm.
But he does, and there's also a nice like a Bad Idea does a great job with these B-sides. There's one in here called The Fisherman's Wife by Richard Pace, Christopher Minton on the art, Matt Lopes on the color art, Dave Sharp on the lettering. And it's just this strange story with some nice art about this woman who's somehow in love with the squid. And the squid are somehow mystical creatures. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but it was a cool 8-page story. So good issue. I got to say, they're expensive. This one was $8 for 40 pages. So I guess it's, when it's $4 for 20 pages at Marvel, it's not really expensive. But they do, I got to say, they've been doing a good job. And of course, the varnish on the covers is perfectly done because I take care of that. King Scott loves Stray Bullets.
Wilson, when did the Valerian anime come out?
Respawns.
That came out. I just had that window open too.
3 spawns. By the way, I just was reading the comic shop news, and they were like, talking about the, hyping up the Spawn books a little bit because there's 4 of them. And he's like, you can, and best of all, you can keep track of all 4 Spawn books for only $12 a month. I was like, yeah, it only costs 4 spawns a month for 4 spawns.
All right, so you want to know when the movie came out?
We're going to count Planet of the Apes. Not really. Planet of the Apes wasn't that much of a time travel story.
No, it opened up with time travel and then 2017 is when they did this particular the live action movie, which visually was beautiful, but it was nothing like what I was expecting.
Okay, because the first Valerian album, The City of the Moving Waters, came out in 1970. That one has time travel. And they're not exactly time travel in the other stories, but there's a cycle of 3 albums that came out sometime later. But in 20. So I don't know if the anime is adapting those albums in particular.
Right, I did not know. I did not know about them until the anime came out. That was my first introduction to them, and it was like then later I found out they had comic books, and when I went looking for the comic books, could not find any of them in English at that time. And I was hoping that because of this movie was coming out, would they reprint the books and have them in English so I could actually finally read the comic books themselves. And at one point, I know I had a list of them to order from Amazon, and I never got them. And it was Bunch who told me about the albums. Because he's huge fans of them.
Yeah, I've never actually read Valerian. I don't know why. There were some things that looked like Valerian that I remember reading.
Well, they influenced so many.
Yeah.
So many things, especially Star Wars.
Totally. Yeah.
Many of the Star Wars designs came from those books. And again, I never knew they existed. If I was to run into them and I would be going through them, it's like, oh, when did this come out? Because this is all Star Wars.
Now, the first album was serialized in 1969, and then was published in 1970. Although no, the first album was serialized in 1968. There was a shorter story that came out before that one. The album only came out after. So this was coming out in Pilot, but this is Roger Le Courrier, and Le Courrier was this is Mézières. No, where was I seeing Le Courrier? Le Courrier did some stories after Mézières retired. Yeah.
But I'll say this about the movie. The very beginning of it, the first 10, 15-minute intro of how humans went out into space, and that whole, and I think it's the song is to Starman, or at least to it's definitely to a David Bowie song. It is just a beautiful opening shot to any movie where you're watching it. It's like, wow, this is going to be an amazing movie, and it's not exactly that, but that opening was worth just watching it.
I just got some corrections in.
Ah, there you go.
Finally.
Look at that. Luckily, they're easy. Just updating some pages and moving some balloons.
You say that now.
Nah, so far. I haven't read all the way through.
Right.
Sometimes they just look easy at first glance. But let's see. Okay. 4, 2, 1. 1, 2.
Now is the part where you go like Chris and just spend the rest of the stream with your head down.
No, I don't think so. I think I'll be done in a couple minutes. Let's see. One of the tricky things about doing corrections sometimes is they don't really know what percentages mean in terms of visual percentages. Mm-hmm. Because when they say, make this 50%, 50% of something is actually 1/4 the size. And they don't really mean that. They mean they want it to take up about half the space it takes up now, which is probably somewhere closer to 70%. So it's like, you gotta kind of know that, because I just have to make something down 50%. I'm like, I don't think he wants it 50%.
I get editors who is like, could you just move it just a scotch to the right, or just a tiny bit to the left? is what I would get sometimes with it.
Do you have it in a different blue?
No, I get that from art directors. Can I see another version of this? Maybe like 2 or 3 versions of these colors. And it's like, you got to pick the color. Tell me what the color is. I'll make it that color. Cause it's like, could I just see 2 so I could pick from one? It's like, And the worst
do something. I don't know what I want, but I'll know what I want when I see it.
Exactly. And as a colorist, that's where it burns you, because you have to put the artwork to a certain stage, so someone who doesn't understand what they're looking at can look at it and judge it. Because when you're coloring and you have various layers, before you send them a JPEG, you got to flatten those layers. You want to make sure you save it in such a way that you could go back and make whatever one little change is. And sometimes, because I've had one art director like, could you just send me what it looks like right now? And it's like, all right, but you're not going to understand what you're seeing. And you send it to them, And if they don't have Photoshop, or if they have Photoshop and they don't know how to click simple buttons like the I button that makes this layer viewable, they freak out on what they see because they have no idea what they're looking at. And I had someone call me up freaking out. It's like, give me 2 minutes. Let me flatten this and send you a JPEG. And again, it's like, I always hate when someone goes, "Well, I know it's not finished. Let me see where it is so far." It's like, you don't get it. You don't know what you're going to look at, and that's always the fun ones.
You don't go into the kitchen until the cooking's all done.
Exactly. Or, one of the stories that I tell is when I was coloring a book that one takes place in New York City at Halloween, and so the creator who wrote the book, who used to live in New York, now lives in Florida. He gets the pages, he's opening them up, and he's freaking about the trees. And he's like, "Why are they those colors? Trees are supposed to be green." It's like, well, it's autumn. Do you understand that our trees change colors? And I get back in the text, "Oh my God, you're right. You're a genius." I was like, "Really?" Because 10 minutes ago, I was an asshole who didn't know what trees were. And it's like, but the worst part is that this guy lived in New York all his life, and he only moved to Florida in the last 10 years. But for the first 40 years he lived in New York, he knows the story takes place in New York and that the trees change colors. And it was just amazing how he hasn't been around trees that change colors in about a decade and wasn't aware. But he wanted it. He wanted to make sure that this was a New York story, and he wanted it to be a certain way, and he wanted things to be colored a certain way. And it's like, yeah, I could do all that stuff. Oh, it's like, oh, we got trees, they're changing colors, let's do that. And he could not get away from the colors of the trees. And again, it was like one of those things, that's all he saw was that color. He didn't look at the rest of the book because he didn't understand what he was seeing at that point in time. So it's just, the weird things that people focus on. I went from being an asshole to a genius within 5 minutes.
Super genius. I like the sound of that. Let's see. I think I'm done. Just got to email it. Just got to make the PDF and email it. Bum, bum, bum. Getting there all terrible. Number 2 out. Oh, you just sent me a text too to make sure I saw it.
So the anime was called Time Jam. Valeria and Laureline. So that's why I always thought it was always about time traveling. Because that particular series dealt with it. That came out in 2000, I believe. No, 2007 was the animated series, and that had 26-minute episodes. Yeah, so I always thought they had to always do with time traveling because of that one section.
There are some time travel stories, but not, and they're recurring, but they're not the only thing that happens.
Mm-hmm. That's a series I need to track down again because, like I said, I know I had made a list, and I was looking for them, and it kind of like, oh, I'll get them once they have them in English. There were 40 episodes of the series. And I really like the art. I really like the artwork, although I think it was produced in France itself.
The worst reprint I've gotten in a while. Three Stooges A Hollywood Laugh Riot. Now, I got another Three Stooges sort of facsimile reprint a few weeks ago from the same company. That was pretty good. This one, first of all, this cover is 72 DPI.
Uh-huh.
And the insides, I think they must have found these scans on the internet and didn't clean them up at all. It's like the colors have all breaks in them. Let me go full screen just so you can see. Like, look at all the white in that magenta right there.
Yeah.
And you can see, you know how Wilson will know this. When you scan a book that isn't quite flat, you get curling in the scan on the very edge.
Yep.
There's some of that going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I bet they found these scans because you can like, I forget the name of the site, but you can put in like public domain comics, and it'll bring you to this site, and it just has scans of all these public domain comics that you can look at. And they're just, scanned in by some guy with a scanner. They're not meant to be reproduced in a book.
Right.
And these were obviously just scanned by some guy. Look at that blue sky. That's supposed to be a solid blue. It's like, woo. So I don't think I'll be buying anything by these guys again, just because.
Yeah, they did not want to spend any money on having someone fix those, and they can be done, but it's tedious.
Yeah,
and it's going to cost some money.
But it
can be done.
I don't even know if this level of crappy can be fixed. It would take way too. You'd be better off buying a different copy of this Three Stooges comic, rescanning it, and using those. It would be cheaper and faster to do it.
It would be, yeah, if you weren't doing it from the internet, which they probably did pull it from there.
Yeah. Because I don't know how many copies of this are available anywhere. So, but come on, you don't want to pay like $100 for the comic and then pay somebody to scan it in. Why are you putting it out?
Yeah, because it was a free comic book. It was a quick cash grab. Is that a reprint on the back of for the?
No, they did their own Three Stooges.
Okay. So
they're obviously doing more Three Stooges stuff because there's
They probably got a license.
There's actually the Robonic Stooges or something is the name of it, and there's actually a new comic in here about the Robonic Stooges,
which are probably based on the animated series.
There was an animated series.
It came out in the 70s. I don't know if Hanna-Barbera did it, but they made the Three Stooges into Bionic Stooges. That was their superhero type of thing that when they licensed to bring back older characters like that, what do we do with them? In the 70s, superheroes were the big things, so everyone became superheroes. So they had like a superhero power. I don't recall who put that out though.
Scott Cochran. The Planet of the Apes first movie was regular time travel, like the science. They had gone so fast that their time slowed down. Then they came back to Earth many minutes. We were discussing this a couple weeks ago, and I think my point was Planet of the Apes only became a time travel story at the end. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. You know what? I have never read Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. I've always meant to.
Cadillacs and Dinosaurs doesn't have any time travel. It's a post-apocalyptic world.
Oh, it's post-apocalyptic. Okay, see, I didn't even know that. All right. That's, what's his name? Schultz?
Mark Schultz, yeah.
Mark Schultz. I couldn't remember his first name. That's one over the years, I always meant to read and never did. It's like, weird.
Yeah. He came up with the name Cadillacs and Dinosaurs for the video game because when he licensed out the comic for the video game, the guys who did the game, they didn't know what Xenozoic meant. So they had to let. So what's the story? Well, there's this guy who drives Cadillacs and he kind of tames dinosaurs. Great. He must have said something like that because the end title sounds like it. Cadillacs, like he just explained it like that. But Cadillac being a trademark, they had to license it for the video game. But that's okay because video games sell well enough so you can
get the
trade General
Cadillac
Motors.
license.
Yeah.
But
I haven't seen the oversized Taschen Spider-Man. He said the best looks like the original print. Does it look like the original print when it was new, or an aged version of the? I don't know how Taschen is printing those because I'm not a huge fan of the like artificial aging of comics. I want my Taschen Spider-Man to look like the comics were new in it, not 40 years old.
Right.
It's a cartoon on Tubi too. I guess no, not way aged, just a little. Like my favorite printings of that old Marvel stuff is the Fireside books because they're still using the original screens. It's on a matte paper, but it's not glow. It looks real good, but it doesn't age like newsprint does. So I really like those Fireside printings. To this day, that Doctor Strange Fireside book is just my favorite of the Ditko printings. Mm-hmm. Oh, and one thing I read this week that I showed, I got volume 7, I think I showed last week, got volume 6 too of Lazarus. Read both of these. Boy, this is still a terrific book. It's just really, really good. Unlike the politics of Nexus on Ilum, the politics going on this is really, really interesting. And it's kind of coming to a head now. There's been a shooting war going. For like the first maybe 4 volumes was a build-up to war. Then a shooting war started, and and now the war's been going on for a while, and they're trying to finish it. Let's see. They printed the color of the newsprint, but not so much like Hip Hap. Yeah, Hip Hap Family Tree was too much. That is for sure. But you see, the color of the newsprint is where it gets me. The color of the newsprint when it's new was just a little off-white. It wasn't yellow. A lot of times, since they wanted to make an old comic, they make the color of the newsprint aged newsprint. That's what I never like. It's like, why? I'm okay with it being new newsprint. And off-white, but it's the aged news. But this is like I said, I was buying this in its individual issues until it changed to a quarterly square-bound format, so I gave up on it. I was like, and a volume 2. Sometimes putting a volume 2 out just gives you a chance to drop it. But I really liked the comic, so I finally went and when volume 2 came out, I went, I'll get the collected editions, which usually means I never get the collected editions because I don't pay attention to collected editions that much. But finally, I got these, and wow, what a good story! Forever, Lazarus refers to. It takes place in a dystopia. I don't know what year it is. It's like X plus 66 is the year. So it's 66 years or X plus 64, I guess the year is whenever the dystopia happened. Most of their technology is kind of like ours, so they're not that far in the future. But the world has broken down into like sort of feudalism where it's run by families. And the families all make Lazaruses, which are they'd be super powered people. They're not superheroes because they're not heroes. They're soldiers, and each family usually has one of them. They invest all their money and technology into making their super powered person who's kind of their war leader and war enforcer. And Forever is the Carlyles. That's her right there. She's the lead character. She's the Carlyles. War enforcer superhero Lazarus, they're called, and it's just been going on time and time for a while. The story's been going on. We're beginning. It's mostly centered around her, but we get tons of politics out there. Like I said, I've talked about the source books before here, where there's Lazarus source books that are like all about the history and politics, and I can't read them. They're so it's like, whoo, that's like too much for me. I don't need all that information. But I really, and they're a fairly quick read too. So I got through both of these like in the last 4 days, just reading them. So good stuff. If you're looking for, like I said, there's 7 volumes of it now. Check your local library if you want to check them out or something. For Lazarus by Greg Rucka and Michael Lark. But definitely worth a read if you can get them in Portugal. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I've seen them around. I used to like a series that Rucka did at Oni Press, Queen and Country.
Oh yeah, I read some of that. I read the Carla Speed McNeil issues, but I didn't read a lot of the other ones. But Lazarus is really good. Michael Lark is good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it said in volume 7, they said of all people, I think he must have inked some of it, because issues 26 and 27, it says Michael Lark with Tyler Boss, who is the What's the Furthest Place from Here artist, in a completely different style than this. So he must have been doing some of the inks, because I don't see Tyler Boss's style in this at all. He wasn't doing any of the drawing, I don't think. Or if he was drawn just like Michael Lark, which seems strange because he has a style completely different. But good, really, I really enjoyed those two. I'm glad I tracked them down. It makes me want to even track down the source books I'm missing and not read them. Once again, as Wilson says, there's a difference between buying comics and reading comics.
Exactly. Which reminds me, I found another bag.
All right. Let's see what you got.
So this feels pretty thick. So I don't know. I thought there might have been a trade paperback in there, and there's
Let's
not.
give him a solo layout so he can show us the covers.
So this one could possibly be a bag that was merged with other bags, or this is back when I went insane and bought.
Oh, I see a Power Rangers cover there. Were you buying all the Power Rangers covers?
This is when I was buying all the Power Rangers covers. So this is Power Rangers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think this is the first crossover. I think about a week ago or something I showed the second crossover. So this is the first one. Let's see if I could read the year. 2019. Yeah, so this was the first one. And because I love a crossover, they did a lot of...
What year was it?
This was 2019.
Oh, okay. Wait, Wilson actually has comics that have time traveled.
Yes, they travel from the past to the future.
Says Tip Goblin.
So it's each turtle
holding a helmet.
Holding a Red Ranger's helmet. So that's Donatello, Raphael, you got the Yellow Ranger helmet. So basically I got 4 of each because they're each holding the same color helmet. So again, this is back when I was insane.
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
It seemed like a good idea at the time, and I'm so glad that I stopped doing that, because these books are $3.99 each.
Wow.
A complete. This is the version cover. Here's the regular issue of Go-Go Power Rangers. So this was different than the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
That's a nice cover.
It was Rita Raposa. This was the same cover that I showed. Here's another issue of Go-Go Power Rangers. I think these are probably 2 weeks of books together.
You know, I think you're supposed to say that Go-Go Power Rangers. Otherwise, you're making them sound like go-go dancers.
Right, so it's Go-Go Power Rangers. Go-Go Rangers. The big go-go boots.
The Go-Go Rangers.
And then one of their metallic ones. But within these as well, I have a regular Superman comic book.
Okay, look at that.
And I guess this is the issue where he reveals himself to the world. And I think
Reveal
it's fired
yourself,
from the Daily Planet.
It's like I got another email. Hold on here.
Uh-oh.
Let's see. A few things Simon missed and an adjustment on the masthead. Sure. Ba-ba-ba. I hate when I read the page the corrections on and then immediately forget it
Uh-huh.
as I go to look for it.
Now, I could not tell you a single thing about the story because I have no idea. I
Huh.
only bought them. But if I read the covers correctly, it's the it's the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers teaming up with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Huh.
So I will believe that in the story at some point they meet,
Huh.
which goes to canon with the TV show because they met on the TV show. There was a live action turtle show, and I think they were being done by Saban as well. That's why it was probably easy for them to do a crossover.
The 62 Lefty Blues mentioned that there's also a cartoon of Cadillacs and dinosaurs. And the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, and Fish Police were all independent comics that I first found out about in the cartoons without even knowing that there were comics of them. I only found out years later that they were comics.
The way I discovered the Ninja Turtles, I had no idea about them, but when I was in high school, the I went to the High School of Art and Design, and the Animation Media Club got their hands on the Ninja Turtles opening theme song before Turtles came out. And it was something, it was just beautiful to see it for the first time, but I had no idea it was based on a comic book. And so I saw an animation first, then went looking for the comic book and looking at the comic book, and it's like, this looks nothing like the animation at all. You know, because the
No.
book was still in black and white. Archie hasn't done their version of the Ninja Turtles yet, which was an adaptation of the cartoon show. And the cartoon show just looked different because it was in color. So it's like I discovered Turtles through a buddy of mine who had the trade paperbacks for Ninja Turtles, which I don't know if I still have them because we would trade back and forth. Um, like he would like, oh, I don't want these anymore, and he would give them to me, and then months later goes by, it's like, hey, do you still have those? And I'll trade them back, and we would go back and forth with those books all the time. So my introduction was those reprints in the trade paperback for the Ninja Turtles, and I have since bought like that big uh Ninja Turtles book that they put out a few years ago for one of the anniversaries of it, which was a beautiful book because not only do you have the reprints, but you have like the story of Mirage Studios and their first little advertisements and how they were, basically their story, which is a great story because it was successful. That's why it's a great story, because there was plenty of other indie books that came out and we've never heard of because they didn't continue.
The Archie's the Archie's Turtles were published here in the mid '90s by a publisher who usually did not publish comics. They also put out some sort of collected edition of Captain Planet. But yeah, I actually read those Turtles and they were okay-ish. I mean, the first issues adapted the first episodes of the cartoon. Then they started going in a different direction and a different artwork. Then Raphael started dressing in all black.
Hmm. Yeah, they went their own state. I feel like comic books based on cartoons always takes an odd turn because they're made to be basically a kiddie's version of it. And I always feel like you don't need to do that because it was a cartoon. You could just tell a regular story, and the kids will eat it up. They'll enjoy it. It doesn't need to be brought down to, I guess, for lack of a better term, a lower level, because you could just tell regular comic book stories, and even Marvel was guilty of that too with Thundercats. You know, I always thought Thundercats would make a great comic book because its storytelling is there, the superhero type stuff. But when it was part of the Star line, again, nothing wrong with it, but it wasn't what I was already reading at the time. Where it's like, with something like Pirates of Darkwater, seemed to be a little more of an adultish comic, with the lack of a better term that I could think of. Where Pirates of Darkwater, when you're reading it, it was kind of like the cartoon, where it wasn't necessarily for kids because it had a strong storytelling on that. The Invader Zim comics were good. I don't know if I ever read the Invader Zim comics.
I've seen those for years, but I don't
liked
think
the
I've read those
cartoon. I
either.
thought the cartoon was a lot of fun and well done. But I don't know if the comics, because the creator he started off as, I believe, a comic book artist. And then he did the cartoon, and the cartoon took off.
Yeah. And never managed to get into the cartoon. So, I don't. Not really. I don't think it was really my thing. I remember parts of Darkwater that it was okay, but I've never the comics. What I remember from I never read them, but what I saw them, the art looks watered down compared to the cartoon.
Yeah, that was the other thing too, is that they weren't putting the top artists and the top creators on those books. You know, G.I. Joe was lucky that Larry took it on and made it its own thing. And to a certain extent, the Transformers as well. But they were always on that borderline of being something that was being created brand new, but at the same time, by the way, here's the toy line we're introducing this week, so you need to also put these characters in there. So that was in itself a unique situation. I think the ones that worked well that came from TV shows were probably the ones where the story, kind of started in the cartoon show, but they went off on their own stuff. I remember reading some books that were like with the Flintstones. I enjoyed the stories that I read, but it didn't have to actually connect to the TV show. And at least that artwork, if I remember correctly, that artwork was closer to what was there. So I think the older ones, like I remember liking the older Mighty Mouse cartoon, the older Mighty Mouse comics that came out, and again, artwork was closer to the to being on model. I would say with that, with transferring animation to a comic book itself.
I think the Thundercats kind of worked on the first issues. Didn't Jim Mooney work on the first Thundercats in the 80s?
I don't recall. I don't recall names for
because it was a good place to put all those old artists, because they were good at working on model while also making it appropriate for a comic book, for a comic book page, and they knew storytelling.
Yeah.
And the young fans didn't want to see those artists on X-Men. They wanted to see John Byrne too. That was it too. Artists fall out of fashion. Out of fashion.
Yeah, you see that a lot in the 70s, where you have all the old artists from the 50s working on the comics that don't sell. Like Ghost Rider and the Human Fly. which is how we end up finding out about well-respected artists that we actually had no idea who he was.
Mhm.
The Bob Lubber story.
I don't know. Did I buy The Human Fly? I think those books were out after, because that's a 70s comic, I believe.
Yeah.
So I don't think I own an issue of The Human Fly.
Yeah, there are videos of the Human Fly on YouTube. An interview that the guy did back in the 70s, and him riding the airplane. But
All I
nobody
remember-
actually.
All I remember from The Human Fly is the Buscema cover, probably
Oh.
to the first issue. Or was it Ramita? No, I think it was a Buscema cover.
We looked at the issues of Human Fly on here one week and discovered, who was it we discovered? The Tarzan artist?
Bob Lubbers.
Yeah. Bob Lubbers. For some reason we got talking about the Human Fly. I better hit send on this first. That's important with the emails.
Yep.
We were talking about the Human Fly, and Human Fly was one of my favorites as a kid. Not because it was a good comic, but because I got the first issue of it, and it was like the first comic that I had all the issues of, because it only went, I don't know, 20, 15, whatever it was. And I always had an affection for it because there weren't a ton of first issues in the late 70s. So that was like, I got the first issue, and cool. It was a real life hero, and I continued to buy it because why not?
Right.
And then it finally ended, and I was like, woohoo, complete collection.
Did he interact? Was he in the Marvel universe, or did he have? It was his own universe.
He was, but he didn't interact with that. He interacted on the covers more than the stories, kind of thing. I don't really remember. He was like he was a guy who was a real life daredevil who no one knew who he was, who was in an accident and broke every bone in his body, and doctor said he'd never walk again, but through sheer determination, he made himself better. And he had this team, they'd go around do their stunts and solve crimes. They were a little Scooby-Doo-ish, but in the Marvel universe. But I just happened to drag them out, and we were looking at them.
Yeah.
And I was showing them on screen, and I was like, and some of them were drawn by a guy named Bob Lubbers. And I went, Bob Lubbers? Because I remember them drawn by Lee Elias and a few other people. I'm like, I don't even know who Bob Lubbers is. And sure enough, none of us knew who Bob Lubbers was. And we looked him up. He was even, for a time, the syndicated Tarzan artist. There's like web pages dedicated to him for his Tarzan work. Right. It was just like, wow. Someone none of us knew existed.
Because, the adventure strips, they seem to have some dedicated fans, but there's no completist obsession with cataloging and owning, because you can't really own.
Right.
So the collectors don't carry, the historians end up not carrying it. And it's like when I first found out about Johnny Hazard, it was one of those cheap magazines that they used to reprint semi-legally old newspaper strips that we had here in Portugal. And I once bought one with Johnny Hazard. Oh, Johnny Hazard, what is this? Looks nice. and it was nice. But then I saw Frank Robbins, and Frank Robbins can draw. And it was like, that thing ended in 1977, and I had no idea.
Yeah, neither. I did not hear of Johnny Hazard until my friend Ed Marr bought an original Johnny Hazard strip, a Frank Robbins Sunday strip. I was like, whoa, Johnny Hazard. I don't think I've heard of that one.
Yeah,
I've never heard of him.
Yeah, and it was only last year that I found out about a syndicated police action strip called Carrie Drake, which lasted for 40 years, and I no idea. And every time I see one of these newspaper strips in it, how come I've never heard of this before? Why is nobody talking about these? And they have great art. I mean, Carrie Drake. Let me see if I can find some of the artists for this, because they changed the artist. So this was created by a guy called Alfred Andriola, and then the guy who did most of the art was called Fran Matera, who happened to be the artist on Steve Roper and Mike Nomad, another adventure strip that everybody keeps forgetting. But these guys, they did not. Nowadays, there seem to be a lot of people moving from when they don't get work in the comics industry anymore. They move to newspaper strips. But back in the day, they wouldn't let the comic people handle the newspaper strips. And when one of them graduated to the strips, they hit the jackpot. They would not come down to the comic books again. But now it's where they put the leftovers. Like when Paul Ryan died, he was working on the Phantom, and Paul Ryan did the best Phantom strips, Phantom stories ever. Even better than Cyberry.
That's another one I've always wanted to get into, but never have, is the Phantom. Just because there's so little Phantom out there in the U.S.
Very little. I didn't even know he was still being published overseas. When the Phantom movie came out, and I saw it on the first day, they were giving out comic books. They were giving out issue of the Phantom. One is oversized compared to an American comic book, and the numbering system that it was in the thousands. And that blew me away because I've never saw an American comic book hit 1,000. The closest one was, I think, a Donald Duck book was the only one that ran consecutively up to or just got canceled right before it was going to hit in the thousands.
Yeah, Walt Disney Comics and Stories, I think. Actually, let me see how many issues it got to.
But with the Phantom book, it was like full color book, a little oversized. I got to track it down because I don't know what it did. But it was one of those things where it's like, oh, I did not know it was still in print and that it reached over 1,000. Because I want to say it was like 1,230 something, but I'm not even sure of the number because this is like, again, I read it the first week when that movie came out, and I put it away and I've looked at it again. But it got me searching for, has any American comic book reach over 1,000? And at that time, a Donald Duck book was going to, but I don't know if they ever hit it.
Well, Walt Disney Comics and Stories was canceled on 633. That was in 1993. Then it was brought back, canceled again, brought back again, but they used the old numbering, and it got to 756.
Okay.
I think that's it. Yeah. But the Phantom was there's actually a lot of Phantom comic books, and not necessarily reprinting the newspaper strips. Although some stories were adapted from the strips, but taking advantage of the comic book page, so they were redrawn in the same style. Bill Lignani redrew a bunch of them. I think it was easy to draw because you already have the original art to copy.
Right.
And you just stretch some things. But there's let's see here. Because there's and
the Phantom is one of those older stories. Like, is that public domain?
No, not yet. The
Lee Fawkes family still has it.
Yeah, well, and they're controlled by the syndicate, by King Feature Syndicate. So,
okay.
But the first The first strip was published in 1936. So it's still not in the public domain. 95 years. Yeah, it's going to be in 2031 that it's going to hit the public domain. And even then, it's the first set of strips that are going to hit the public domain.
Speaking of public domain, when's the last time Marvel published a Human Fly story? Or did they license that from the guy who was the Human Fly?
They
Canadian
licensed it.
Treasure.
I believe he licensed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he licensed it.
Gasoline Alley is a classic. I didn't discover Gasoline Alley to the Walton Skizix reprints that started, 15 years ago. That is one of the great strips of all time.
Is it?
It is really, really well done. National Lampoon parody versions.
Yeah, they still don't know exactly who the Human Fly is because they know his name, but there's nothing known about him. The guy's name was Rick Rojet. But there's no information on him, so even his real name might be a pseudonym.
Yeah, that sounds like a fake name to me.
Uh-huh.
Another comic I got this week was the triple-sized Black Cloak, and I got the cover with the slight hint of nipples on the front. They actually sent out a warning to the comic shops because they didn't tell them when they ordered it that there was nudity in the cover, and it's barely nudity. I mean,
or in Europe, it would be just a regular comic.
Yeah, just a regular. I mean, that's barely nudity in the U.S. But I was like, all right, give me the nude one.
Yeah, give me the nipple edition.
Yes, but it's by Kelly Thompson, Meredith McLaren, and Becca Carey, and it was okay. I'm glad it was triple the length because I liked it I liked the last third better than the first third. It's I don't know what you'd call it, fantasy police procedural. The lead in the story is this woman who used to be in some kind of royal family before she became a Black Cloak. And the Black Cloakers are a fairly new organization, and they're policemen in this world. So it was her investigating a murder, and the murder victim happened to be, some guy she was dating 20 years ago in the royal family. So she's got to go back and talk to the royal family, and there's problems, and there's this, and there's that. By the end of it, I liked it, but at the beginning, it took a while. So I'm glad it was triple length. And the art was just okay. I mean, I kind of liked some of the art, but some of it was kind of amorphous. Let me give you a little close up. Some of it was a little too ill-defined for me. Like that panel right there. It's nice, but some of the drawing is okay. But then some of the drawing, it's like the graphic design isn't quite good enough and the drawing isn't quite good enough in spots. But in other spots, it's all right. So this is an artist I've never heard of before. Meredith McLaren. But I mean, in spots, I like it. So I think she's got potential, but I don't know if she has reached her full potential yet. But I'll give it another issue. That's what's good about my comic shop. I can get final order cut off and order things issue by issue if I want to. So it's just like, I'll give it another issue. Don't have to commit to putting it on the pull list. Because, a lot of stuff, being that I'm an indie collector, there's just not shelf copies of it. They don't exist because the shop isn't buying an extra 5 copies for people who'll never buy it.
Right.
Step by Bloody Step was my favorite time travel comic of 2022. Time looping story, more accurately, I guess. Ooh, I don't think I've heard of that one. Step by Bloody Step, because I'm a fan of time loop movies. I haven't seen too many time loop comics. But time loop movies I'm a fan of. Except for, do you know Scott Lobdell wrote a movie?
Death Day. A Happy Death Day.
Happy Death Day. That was it.
Yeah.
And it's a time loop movie. And
Okay.
I'll confess up front, I've never been a fan of Scott Lobdell's writing. Just doesn't land with me. So I heard about this Happy Death because I'm always looking for time loop movies when I'm like, what movie? I wonder if there's any new time loop movie. I'm a sucker for time loop movies.
Yeah.
So like,
I'm as
oh,
well.
Happy Death Day. This sounds interesting. I don't know about actually the second one I started watching first. There's a sequel. And I was just like, wow, this is a sequel. I watched it for a good half an hour before I went, I can't take it anymore. This writing is just terrible on it. Then I looked it up and found out it was a sequel, and I was like, oh, it's written by Scott Lobdell. Well, that explains why I didn't like the writing so much. But I found it, I was like, oh, look, he got himself a movie franchise. 2 movies made he's the writer of.
Yeah.
Step by Bloody Step was wordless. I picked up the TPP, and it's good. I'm going to have to check that one out. Step by Bloody Step. Yeah, I'll write that one down on one of my scrap pieces of Mylar, because otherwise I'll never remember it.
So
what was that?
No, I was going to say, so as I was cleaning up, one of the other things that I found was that I'm a sucker for finding and getting Marvel books from other countries.
Yeah.
Because I do like the reprints and how they approach their books. Now, this is an older one. This is from '98, and this was published by Marvel Italia.
Ah.
So I'm almost sure I probably picked this one up at the Marvel office.
Right. I've picked up like my my German Captain America Mad Bomb. I just picked up at the offices.
So I always find it fascinating with how they do the interiors. Like, so there's the design for it.
Ah. I recognize that font.
Are still white. So this it's a cream white. And I always do like how they're reprinted. The story looks like they're jumping around because this looks like he's teamed up with Team America, or is he fighting against them? They might be SHIELD agents. I am not too sure.
Team America were motorcycle stunt riders.
Right. So I think that's them, but I'm not positive.
I'm not
they
positive
had a very
either. I haven't seen them in a long time.
Generic costume. And then there's reprints of this. Looks like an early John Romita Jr. Spider-Man.
Ah, okay, yeah.
And again, it's one of those things where it's like I just like the way it's printed, and I haven't looked it up to see if it matches the coloring of the originals, because what I find sometimes when the book is reprinted in another country, they'll do a different set of coloring on them.
Yeah.
Or they don't color them at all. There were some French books that I have that are completely black and white, and I thought those looked really nice. I'll track those down to show you.
If the colorist, if the original colorist is credited, they're using the original coloring.
Okay, let's see.
Where is anybody credited?
That's the thing. I do not see a credits list.
If you're guessing that it was John Romita Jr., I'm guessing the credits aren't easy to find.
If they're not in the stories, they
actually, yeah, they have the original
okay.
credits page. Or the
let's blow that up
page.
so we can read it. Okay, yeah, the original credits are there.
Yeah.
The Vendetta of the Robot.
Yep. Hell hate no fury like a robot scorn.
Interesting. So they didn't mess with the letter with the lettering inside the art.
The display lettering there, yeah.
The Brazilians would totally take that out.
The title lettering.
Yeah, if it's drawn in the art and it has a purpose, they would also completely destroy it and create their own.
What else do we have here? Let's see.
So they have it in English.
But mastheads are easy to change. I don't know why they didn't bother.
Caught in the act. I guess that's the translation under there. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, but the title doesn't really affect. In that case, the title doesn't affect the art, so there's really no reason why that's in there. Both the
There's
masthead and the title should have
it's easier to leave it in than take it out. That's why it's there.
Yeah. Because if they take it out, then someone else is going to have to go and draw it in, and they didn't have access to the Ramita Raiders.
Sleepy just said, "Damn, I was just about to scorn a robot."
Hide in plain sight.
See, the Brazilians had an office for that. I mean, they even keep There's no point in keeping the original credits either, because the letterer is definitely not the same person. So
it's easier not to
but
fix
they did. They do the credits, and the credits are translated, so it looks like the letterer did that part. You can see it. I don't know if
we can't.
Yeah, it's tough to see.
Yeah, it's very tough to see.
But they did translate the lettering.
They did translate that portion of it for the credits.
Up, another email. Let's see. Typo. 13.
But I do like looking at the comic books in another language just to see what they did with it and how they make changes to it. And again, I'm always curious on how basically the comics traveled.
Mm-hmm. But until the 1990s, it would not be out of the ordinary if the publisher would completely wreck the story, remove pages, remove panels, redraw stuff, because sometimes they legally have to. For example, in Captain America reprints in Germany, they were legally prohibited from showing swastikas inside the book because it's a children's book. So all the Nazis had the swastikas off.
Right. And I've seen a few of them to also the changes in the art to fit the format of the books. I've seen that a lot with the I think Spider-Man printed in England as a weekly series, or there was a weekly comic book and the covers were always different or something similar to the original, but changed because the format was almost like a where they seemed to be printing the covers so they would read that way for some reason. I don't know if the book itself read that way because I don't have any of the Spider-Man books from England. And I have to find, because fairly recently I got a few books from, I think, Germany that reprinted the original Spider-Man books, the original first 12 issues, and I like the format of the book that they did for that one, but I got to track down what I did with them. They're on a pile here somewhere.
Sleepy says he was always fascinated by Brit Marvel with extra splash pages. Yeah. I never saw any of those British Marvel ones.
I've only seen covers, and I always wanted to get the Secret Wars comics that they put out because that became like the generic term for Marvel overseas. So Secret Wars, we had a 12-issue miniseries, but overseas they just in England they just kept using that title and they just like expanded the story itself. So I think like the main story would be a Secret Wars story, and then they would have a whole bunch of backup stories of the other superheroes.
Was it Mexico that did Spider-Man stories?
Yeah,
I heard that recently that in
they
Mexico,
did. I think they wanted to reprint those stories in the U.S. I know they have done so in Germany.
So from what I understand, that Mexico, they love Gwen so much that when they killed her in the States, they did not kill her in Mexico. So the Spider-Man story branched.
Yeah.
And then the story about Spider-Man getting married to Gwen Stacy and their life together became its own thing. But I've only ever seen a couple of covers. I've never seen an interior. So I don't know if that's a true story or not.
It is. The story. There are about 100 or so issues with where Gwen Stacy continued to live, and they wanted to reprint as many of those stories as possible because they're highly sought after by collectors of foreign comics because they don't have a U.S. equivalent.
Right.
Here's a question from Tit Goblin. I guess it's different with every company and era. But when comics go to other countries to get translated, how much stuff can they legally change? Those conditions would be in the contracts. I doubt it.
Nowadays, there are conditions in the
I would think so for some with individuals control. First of all, I don't think people want to change that. If you're licensing Spider-Man to be printed in France, I don't think you want to change it too much.
The thing is that there are more comic book fans in those positions nowadays than there were in the old days. Because in the old days, the guys who licensed it to a foreign publisher, they didn't care what the foreign publisher did.
No, they didn't.
And the guys the foreign publisher got it, and they didn't care what was in there either. Yeah. It's a comic. Do anything, whatever.
I think if you were publishing like Neil Gaiman's Sandman, and you for some reason decided to I don't know how you could go astray in translating stuff like that. Some madman got a hold of it and just did crazy things with it. I think it would have to be that like Neil Gaiman would have to see it in order to see, because he wouldn't speak whatever language it was in. Right. He'd just have to go, well, that looks nuts. What's going on? Yeah, so I think it would be hard to change stuff too much.
The Brazilians, even though the guys who were in charge of in the 80s, the guys who were in charge of the Marvel comics, they were fans. They also messed it up a lot just because one problem was that when they started in 1979, they didn't have the rights to everything because there was another publisher in Brazil who still had the rights to some things, and they progressively bought the rights of what they wanted, and they only got everything that they wanted in 1983. So when they started publishing some things, they were in certain. One was in 1970. This was in 79. So one was in 1972. Another was in 1975. Another was in 1971. And some of those comics, they were monthly. Others were bi-monthly. Others appeared in anthologies. And the publisher when they convinced the publisher to buy the rights, the publisher, we want only closed stories. Because you can't at DC, that was easy. They published Disney, and Disney all stories are closed. They didn't want continuity. But the guys, no, everything has all of this has continuity. And when he had the translator, I've seen an interview with the translator, and how he had to explain to the publisher, okay, so this story is not a good story, but we have to publish it because of the continuity. And they were like, well, why?
Yeah, I think Sleepy hit the nail on the head there. With back in the day, they were just happy to take the extra money. They didn't care.
Yeah, that's exactly.
There was nothing but that.
Yeah, as long as you didn't draw cocks in the characters' faces.
Yeah, you'd have to do work to wreck it would take work to get stuff that they would
there was a lot of there are things that you noticed that were changed, and there's a Hulk issue before the Crossroads saga begins, when the issue where they send the Hulk to the Crossroads. The Brazilian guys had to change the art in the entire story. Why? Because the Hulk, it was still taken out of 3 or 4 years until they got all the chronology in the same place after Secret Wars 2. And at the time, the Hulk was further advanced than most of the other Marvel characters. And the Avengers appear in this story. The problem, Monica Rambeau had not debuted yet. Star Fox had not returned as Star Fox and joined the Avengers. And because they haven't published Secret Wars yet, Spider-Man had the black costume. So they redrew Monica Rambeau as the Scarlet Witch. They redrew Star Fox as the Beast. And they erased Spider-Man and redrew everything again with the original costume.
Wow.
Yeah. that one they had to redraw everything. Usually they didn't have that problem. Sometimes they would just like Iron issues where Iron Man appeared with the nose. They just white it out and no nose. No
Yeah, we ruined Scott's Spidercock idea of his foreign license. but don't worry. Next year you can do Steamboat Willie Cock. Perfectly.
Yeah. Finally, Steamboat Willie is going to the public domain.
And here's another comic I got this week. Was this the 4th issue? Issue 4 of Dark Ride. This is getting good too. By the Birthright guys, Williamson and Bresson and Lucas, about a Disney World theme parks only dedicated to horror. And it turned out at the beginning, though, these 2 kids in here, their parents, their father made a deal with some demons to get this park going because no one would buy into his vision of a horror theme park. And like the son and daughter who are running it now don't even know there's real demons running around. And they're just kind of discovering it this issue. And there's been death and maiming and all sorts of fun stuff in this theme park. So it's been good stuff. Oh, ready to upload. All right. We can upload this comic. It is almost done. Well, this has been good. A little dark ride for it. And this is a nice one of the strange observations, and Sleepy Reader agreed with me too on Birthright. As much as I like what's his name? Andre Bresson. As an artist, I haven't liked like all through Birthright. I didn't like his covers. This is the first cover that really caught my eye of his. I don't know why. His drawing's fine, but for some reason, I just don't think he does covers that well. It's a weird thing.
It looks like something that Barry Blair would publish.
Yeah. This is, not quite, but yeah. Going
to right, not in terms of content, but in terms of quality.
Yeah. It's good stuff. It gets close in content. All right, let me turn this over here so I can upload this. First, we make the PDFs. I actually just had to deliver something today, Ramon, to a Wilson to a print-on-demand site as RGB JPEGs.
Ah, okay.
That's
the way it was. Yeah, Kablam used to be that way. I don't know if they still are, but I used to send a lot of stuff to Kablam, and it had to be RPG. And it's like, you sure? Does it really need to be? Can I double check it?
Yeah.
And of course, and it's like, yep. And it just goes against everything we were taught.
Oh yeah, that's because they're not.
They're not off.
They're not offset press, and they're. And this particular company, I forget who it was, because I had to go on their site and look at it. They're like, our software turns RGB into CMYK for our offset presses. I'm like, why does it have to do that? Why didn't you just start with CMYK? Steamboat Willie going to Cleveland. Let's see, another issue I got, All Against All, issue 2, which was fun. Once again, this is about the jellyfish aliens who use other creatures as their bodies, and they stumbled. There's one of them in their natural water form, but they're not in water anymore. And they came to Earth, and Earth was already destroyed. Earth was gone. And these aliens are fighting a war with some other aliens and are losing. So they're looking for stronger bodies. And Earth was like completely destroyed due to us, I don't know, getting to nuclear wars or something. But they found a genetic storehouse. So they grew some humans and some animals. And this is more of that story. I guess they want to use the humans as their bodies, but It's really about these aliens. So it's been pretty good. Except this guy, this one human who they grew, who looks very much like Commandy, the last boy on Earth, because he's the only boy on Earth. And he kind of got loose and was killing some of them. So it's been a fun 5-issue mini. I like when the miniseries tell me they're miniseries. They don't always do that these days. It's really annoying because that helps me decide if I want to go till the end of it too. Like there was a book recently, Twig, that I sort of liked. It was really more of a kid's book, but the art was terrific. And I ended up buying 3 issues of it and then going, oh, I don't want to put it on my pull. But it ended up being a 5-issue miniseries. If I'd known that, I would have just bought the last 2 issues. But I didn't. So I got 3 out of 5 issues of a miniseries. Okay. All righty.
The book's on its way.
Well, let's see if I can upload them. I probably have enough bandwidth. We'll see. I'm guessing I can stream and upload. Have you ever used the Kodak Insight Press portal?
I may have.
It's the publisher. This is going to the publisher in Canada who publishes Marvel and DC books too. So I think they use it. Whatever that publisher in Canada is named, I can't remember. Celesco?
Maybe. They're the ones that took over Quebecor?
I think so.
I know I've used a portal for one of the big printers. Where there was a date that was like, oh, we're going to have to teach you how to use these. There was like a whole class almost had to be like created to use their system. It's like, we open the file, put it here. Yeah. Okay, then that's good enough for me.
All right, it's uploading. 13%.
There you go.
We'll just have to wait and see. There's, what you do with when you're sending graphics to the printer is used to be called. It's still called pre-flighting. I guess they took it. We want to be airline pilots, so we're pre-flighting. So that when you send this to the Insight, if everything's okay, they give you a little green airplane.
Yeah. My favorite used to be is like sending the files and it's like, are you sure you checked everything before you sent it? I was until you questioned it. Now you put doubt in my head. And then once you send it and they receive everything, it's the whole now waiting to see is there going to be a problem.
Yep.
And it usually takes about a day before they send you a PDF to proof. And you go through it. It's like everything looks fine. But even when it looks fine, you don't know until you have it physically in your hands.
Yep. Like, whoa. 59%. It's going up.
Yeah, that's practically flying through.
Yeah. I can't complain about my internet here too much. I mean, I will.
Right.
But it's pretty rock steady. Especially since I have to call them this month to make sure they keep my price from doubling or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Have to do that once a year. Once a year. Oh, and I got a couple facsimiles. The Flash 1, 2, 3.
Look
Which
how
it
big
turns
that
out
$4.99 is.
Yeah.
That's huge on there. Was the original price like that there?
It must be. But it turns out I have this already.
Do you?
Yeah. It was funny. I got it home. Like I was saying in my video, I'm like, I saw somewhere that this is the Hulk #1. That it's like they've printed one in 2019 also. I'm like, do I have that? And I checked my database. I didn't have it. I'm like, oh, I don't have it. Then I went to enter this one in my database and I went, oh, I've already got it. I just didn't even know. But I love these reprints. I just love reprints. They're fun to get these original issues, even if they didn't have the original with the with the Abe Vigoda looking guy in the back.
Uh-huh.
What's his name? Albert Dorn. Oh, this is the famous artist school that was mired in scandal at the end and made a lot of people broke.
Oh, really?
Because all the famous artists, like I forget who, all of a sudden his name flew out of my head. The pinup artist from the 30s. He was one of all these guys. Whoever started it, and it was started by famous illustrators, really famous artists. In the beginning, they took care. You'd send your stuff in, they'd grade it or whatever, give you tips. But over the years, they started getting other teachers in there who weren't famous artists. But all these guys had stock in the school that was their nest egg.
Right.
But then scandal hit. Everyone found out none of the famous artists were involved anymore. And I forget who it was. Whoever the lead guy was told the other artists, "Don't sell your stock. Don't worry about it. Everything will blow over." Meanwhile, he was selling his stock. And so now it wasn't Vargas. It was the guy before Vargas. So I can't remember his name. I got his book over there. He held on to his stock, like his buddy said, and it was worthless. He lost like his nest egg worth of stock. 0 errors, 0 warnings. I like that.
That's very good.
I like that. It's taken me a while to get to that point where in the beginning I'd have a few errors every time.
Right.
For stuff I wasn't even like
Mm-hmm.
had anything to do. Let's see. Should be little green airplanes everywhere. Oh, yeah. "32 pages and 4 covers." Those of you who don't know, 4 covers doesn't really mean 4 covers. It means cover 1 is the front cover. Cover 2 is the inside front cover. Cover 3 is the inside back cover. There we go. And cover 4 is the back cover. That's industry lingo. This is all one sheet of paper usually. So. Now I got to let everyone know it's been uploaded.
All been uploaded.
That went fast too. Even talking on the internet, streaming, those uploaded fast. What's the name of this book? They're all terrible. Uh-oh. Apologies. Here's a correction.
Nope, too late. The book was sent out.
Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 corrections.
10 corrections.
All righty. We want to get it right. What do we got? Let's start with missing a comma.
I run into those as well. Part of it's all part of the process. Your lettering book, things will get looked at. You hope that they do whatever corrections are done in the original script, but it looks different on the typewriter paper than it does on when they look at it as a comic book, and then they looked at it when it's the balloons there, and it's always something, a little thing here and there.
You can look at something so many times and not see it.
Especially if you've been working on it for a while.
Yeah. Come on, give me a comma.
And since I do books that are translated from other countries, sometimes a joke would be in there and the writer did not get the joke. There was like recently I had to do a correction on a book that I was working on where sound effect was one way when the characters took a potion and they shrank, and then when they took the potion to grow again, the original artist flipped what the sound effect said. If it was something like POF, POF, when they took it, it was FOB, FOP. So basically, it was a visual gag with the sound effect that, in the long run, you wouldn't really notice or pay attention. But when it was being translated, they were getting both sound effects with the same exact sound effects, and it wasn't until they were looking it over where they realized, oh, this was a visual gag that we kind of took away. We took away from it that we needed to put back in.
Huh. Ooh, 2 more commas. It's comma mania here. They keep forgetting commas. Commas are tricky. Let's see. 1831. Oh, the exciting action.
Uh-huh. This is what we do on a daily basis. Because I'm actually lettering right now, too, while we're talking, just to catch up on a little bit of time.
Let's see. 1831, add a comma after aren't you. There we go. Good thing I have a comma in my clipboard. Bum, bum, bum. How many commas have you fixed, Paulo?
A lot of them.
A lot of them. And a lot of articles.
Yeah. When interns don't know how to place the commas, where to place the commas.
1, 2, 4, 1. After tonight. 22. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
That's why I like working in comics. It's the excitement.
Oh, pardon me. It's 24 4. No, 22 4 1. How come I can't find it?
Or when we get a text from we get a piece from an outside collaborator, and he doesn't know the proper format for inverted commas, so everything. So we have to change those too. Or when they insist at putting tabs in paragraphs, and those aren't needed because they go formatted in InDesign.
You know what I just did wrong? I read put the comma after tonight. I'm looking for after tonight. It's just tonight. That's the stuff that'll drive you mental.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's like you're looking for something, or it's like, do this correction. It's like, but I did that correction. I already did that correction. I know I did that correction, and not realize it's a second correction on the same item.
Exactly like the
Yep. That I would be looking for words that don't exist because it's just in what they were describing.
24. Scratch that on 18.3. Oh, I already did 18. Now I got to uncorrect 18.3.
Done plenty of those. I had my editor recently go, I apologize, but I did this wrong. I need this corrected back to what it was.
Okay. Got rid of comma after aren't you? 24. We're back to 24.
So if anybody out there has questions about the production of comic books and the excitement that we have, please go ahead and ask. We can
Live the
answer.
thrill.
This is the kind of stuff that leads you to drinking.
Yeah.
Or to eating Twinkies.
Chips.
I don't know what's...
I like the crunch.
I don't...
That's what I need. But when I'm stressing, I need to crunch something.
Yeah, and if you're in the room with somebody else and the other person hates the crunching,
that just makes it even better, really. Because you're destroying something and at the same time causing other people pain.
Ellipses. Whoops.
Or they ask to do something with a font that does not have that ability to do.
I finally changed a font out that was in our masthead that had no accents in it.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Luckily, it was a knockoff font. And I knew it was a knockoff font because it had no accents in it. So I found the original font, which happened to be an Adobe one, which was good because I had the license for it. So I was like, I replaced it with the actual original font rather than the knockoff. Now I have accents for all those names I have to put in there that have accents. I used to be drawing it in my hand in Illustrator.
Well, I always hate also, I would get the question, with an accent font, it's like, can you move it away from the top there just a little bit? It's like, no, there's no way for me to do that on there. I could technically, open the type and then move it. But if anything shifts, that thing is going to get lost.
Ellipses.
This is the geometry lesson portion of our show. I hated geometry.
Gee, I'm a tree.
I don't think I ever actually learned geometry. I had broken my leg when that was being taught. And I was really good. I was really good at math. And then I just lost that one little bit. That's what I tell myself anyway, that I did not get taught that portion. And so I was lost ever since.
Yeah, I think the same happened to me. What was it? It was geometry.
But so far, I haven't had to use it. Or really much of the math that I was taught in school.
Yeah, or was it sines and cosines?
Sine, cosine.
Yeah, one of those. And I'm not going to say that school led me to hate history because I don't hate history, but I was not interested in the history that they taught us in history classes. It was boring. We wanted the cool stuff, like Genghis Khan invading the Russian steppes and murdering everybody. I wanted to learn about that, but no, the kings were responsible for creating this law, which made it better for the peasants. I don't care about the peasants. Nobody cares about the peasants in the movies.
Over here, our history was easier to learn because they only taught us the creation of the United States. Mm-hmm. Because apparently nothing important happened before that, other than a few things that happened in Europe that was like, okay, we need to go. The United States starts with Plymouth Rock, and then we get the information there. And whatever world history we got was because we might have learned it on Schoolhouse Rocks on the weekends. And
There
that's
was
how we
something
found
called the
out about
Black Plague.
no more kings. So that's how we end up getting our history.
Yeah, it wasn't even called history. It was social studies.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, we
We
had
did
social
away with
studies.
history.
We had social studies, but in 5th grade. Then we had history in the 6th grade. And yeah, once again, they didn't teach us the cool parts. I mean, the entire battles between the Iberian peoples and the Romans could have filled an entire semester, but no. That portion's scary. Let's get over with in one single lesson. They made it sound like it was boring. The Romans came and they saw and conquered. Well,
Hey,
that's not
get him a
true.
computer. Stop all the uploading. It was a pretend death march going over 132 pages of my GG book looking for screw ups. Oh, yeah. Man, proofreading your own work is really tough. We are the glamorous ones. I would tell my young nephew that I missed the first day of kindergarten, so I only learned my elemental P's.
Well, luckily the alphabet was put in that order so you can remember it because of the song. So.
And then there's all of those Sesame Street episodes.
Yep. Learned a lot of jazz off of Sesame Street. Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers. All the music they were playing was jazz music in the background. And I learned opera from Looney Tunes.
Uh-huh. Da-da-dum. Da-da-da-da-da. And the merry-go-round broke down. Probably the only song from the 1930s that I know. The merry-go-round broke down.
All right, what am I doing? 28.82. You move the balloon just off the main character's head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ah, I see.
Jared, do count fun count. One ellipsis. Two ellipses. Three ellipses.
Panel, 2 panels. 3
lightning.
panels.
Ha 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 ha.
I love to count panels. Let's see, what do we got here? Grouped.
So as I was going through my files, I found a file called Marvel Logos, and it's basically Xerox copies of said logos. One of my first jobs at Marvel was working for the conventions department, and so we always had copies of the logos in case we needed to use them for press releases or convention previews. So since I worked in conventions, for some reason we would have black and white copies of the books at the convention desk so people can look at them, but the covers were never ready, so I would have to make up fake covers for the books that were going to be printed. So it would be we would just call it a Marvel Comics previews, and these were like my very first designs using the early Photoshop. Nothing was done in color because these were just going to be on the convention floor, and then I would be taking images off of the original covers just to make a single image of like Spider-Man. A lot of Spider-Man because he was one of my favorite characters, and then Spider-Man was big in '94, so he was appearing in I think 4 titles at the time. Spider-Man Unlimited. But I used to have
just 4 titles. That was it.
I think so. You had Peter Parker Spider-Man, you had Amazing Spider-Man, you had Spider-Man, you had Spider-Man Unlimited, and that doesn't even count the 4-issue miniseries like the Deadly Foes of Spider-Man
Huh.
and series like that. Or when Venom became so hot, he had his own. He always had a 4-issue miniseries. It was just like it could have just been an ongoing story, but instead they just kept giving him miniseries. And then I would make these logos with the images just to be used on masterheads and masterhead and the press releases. And this was actually printed for a staff shirt for conventions because every year we would have a new staff shirt made. And depending on the shirt, we would try to design them like a band shirt. So on the back would have all the touring dates of the places we were going because we had what was called the Marvel Mega Booth, and this was this huge booth. I don't know if you ever got to see it, Jared. If you ever got to go to the conventions,
I don't think I remember the mega booth,
so the Mega Booth would
but I've
would be
seen some big
designed,
booths.
huh?
I've seen some big booths though.
hmm So it would be designed to look like the Danger Room in New York
Ah,
City. So the area where the artist would be signing right behind them would be these big windows, as if you were peering into the Danger Room. And what the windows would have would just be blown up images of the comic book characters, and it would be lit in such a way that it looked like they were almost holograms, but they weren't. It was just glass, and the images were lit up from behind, I believe. And so other parts of the booth would kind of look like New York City. So it would be the walls would have just Art Deco on it, kind of a thing. So when you walked into this booth, you walked into the world of Marvel. And in the center would be this globe that would spin, and it would have monitors in there, and it would be showing either commercials or parts of the cartoon shows that were out at that time, which would have been Spider-Man the Animated Series, Iron Man, and the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men were the ones out at that time. So for a while, the branding of anything would have like this globe that represented the globe that was in the center. And what was cool about the globe is it would have areas lit up, and that's where a Marvel office would be. So there would be a New York
ah.
office, a California office, what was called Marvel Pacific Rim. So that was the Japanese office.
I remember that office. I remember that name.
Yeah,
I was
and
like,
then
Marvel at the
Marvel,
Pacific Rim office?
yeah, uh, Morrow UK, and I think there was an office in Italy, which I think was actually Panini's office. Because I think at one time we eventually bought Panini.
Yeah, they bought Panini in the mid '90s in their spending spree. Like I said, I've said
Yes,
before, I remember Panini was the only profitable thing that they bought in that early '90s spending spree, which is why they sold it because they could actually get money for it.
hmm and then another thing that I have here, and I'm not positive what this was used for, but there's some Spider-Man designs by John Romita Sr.
Ah. By the way, I just had to delete all the files I uploaded.
Really?
Yeah, well, because
Oh, because it doesn't do it to update them. It doesn't
it will,
override them.
but then I'd have to figure out the 10 pages of which 10 pages, because I have to send them as individual PDFs, not as one PDF.
Right.
That I don't. It seems crazy to me.
hmm
But rather than try to figure out pick which 10 pages out of the 32, it's easier to delete all 32 and just upload them fresh.
Right.
Otherwise mistakes can be made. Mistakes can be made.
So, like, the Spider-Man is addressed to someone named Bill. This shows the chest emblem and its position. So it's basically pretty much how Spider-Man should always look when he's drawn. the spider web pattern on his mask. A generic view of Spider-Man on the webs.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man.
What his hands should look like and the web pattern on that.
Got to get those web patterns right.
And here's something that I learned while I was at Marvel, and even though I was a Spider-Man fan since the beginning, I never realized that the pattern should always not be affected by the muscles.
Ah.
So any Spider-Man, especially drawn by John Romita Sr., is supposed to just be straight. You never see the muscles cut into it. And it wasn't until that was pointed out, it's like every Spider-Man that's drawn by John is done that way. So the shadows does not go into the emblem at all. It stops right there. And I think this one was used for either the balloon or for one of those PVC's plastic, what you call it? That they
Have
were
you
making
scanned all that stuff in to archive it?
I have not. I happen to find it. I wasn't aware these were with the logos. And then it's just a black and white Spider-Man in his black and white costume. It wasn't even inked. But no, I have not scanned. I plan to scan them in to have them archived. But again, it was like these were mislabeled, and they end up being in the logo stuff. So I'm just going through them because I also have just blank pages in here as well.
Yep, Ike sold all those logo stats right out of the drawer.
Yeah, I don't have any stats. These are all photocopies.
But that's how I had to. That's when I had to learn Adobe Illustrator. By when Marvel first computerized, we'd scan in the physical logos that were on, stat paper, and then we had to clean them all up and streamline them, make them into vector graphics in Illustrator.
And then here's a image that I found that I'm guessing that I know it was drawn by Greg Schiegel. Greg used to always send me when he left Marvel, when he left as an intern, he would always send in samples of his work. And so I would always get a package of his samples, and then he just happened to write a note with a Batgirl on it.
Where is my Greg Schiegel?
With Greg, because he would just draw on the envelope a character just for the heck of it.
Here's one of Greg's comics, Pix. He does these young adult graphic novels. He's good. Talented guy.
Yep.
He was on this show once, I remember.
Was he?
Yeah. Oh, Chris Geruso called him up and he came on. I'd have to look up what week he was on, but yeah, he popped in for an hour or two one week. We got to talk with him. Scott, your GG book was on Pros and Cons mail show last night. It looks great. Reminds me a little bit of Wayne White artwork. Yeah, it was a good book. I enjoyed it. Talked about it last week. Killed a wabbit. Killed a wabbit. I will kill the wabbit with my spear. How will you kill a wabbit? With my spear and magic helmet. Well, on that note, we should say goodbye for the week because I'll send the... I uploaded again. Looks like I got no caution airplanes, all green airplanes, so I'm good to go.
I have to continue lettering myself, and I think I'll be probably doing my TikTok live in like 15 minutes or so.
Paulo has to go to bed.
Yes.
I do.
He's tired. And so go over to Wilson Ramos's TikTok, Ramos Comics, is it?
Ramos Comics is the TikTok name.
On TikTok, you can see him live in about 15 minutes. Doing what will you be doing?
I'll probably be showing some of the stuff that I have here already, especially
Okay.
that package for the logos and stuff like that. I usually try to break it down into segments. I'll do whatever
Right.
toys that I got.
He likes to
this
show
week.
his toys. I've seen plenty of those.
Yeah, so the toys, some toys that I rediscovered, got new batteries put into this Enterprise from Diamond Selects. This came out in like 2001.
Huh.
So it's like I keep forgetting where the button is. So it lights up, and it's like, oh, I'm so glad it worked because the batteries were in there for years, and luckily they didn't corrode, they didn't crust over. So it's like every now and then I find something that's like, this might still have batteries in it, and I completely forgot about them.
All right, so you guys have a good night out there. Hope you enjoyed the thrills of comic book production. Late on a Friday night.
Take care, everybody.
And we'll catch you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.